Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. Don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever felt like the floor dropped out from under you while you were still standing. Now, let me tell you how 30 years of my life fell apart in a voice I wasn't even supposed to hear. It started at 2:43 a.m. That exact time is seared into my brain because I remember glancing at the oven clock while pouring myself a glass of water. I had woken up to use the bathroom, nothing unusual. But then I heard it, faint murmuring coming from downstairs. I thought maybe the TV was left on. Maybe she fell asleep on the couch again, watching her crime dramas. Marion always liked to fall asleep to other people's problems. I walked down the stairs barefoot, slow and quiet, only to stop dead at the hallway corner. Her voice, on speaker, whispering, but not enough. I know, but I can't just leave him yet. Not until after the money clears. Laughter. 30 years of loyalty better be worth at least a beach house, right? I gripped the wall. My knees went hot. I felt like I was standing in someone else's house, listening to someone else's wife. Then I heard a man's voice respond. Low, calm, mocking. You're crueler than I thought, Mari. I like it. She giggled. She giggled like a teenager. I stood there for another 30 seconds, invisible, forgotten, crumbling, while the woman I loved planned my erasure with a man I'd never met. And then, I quietly walked back upstairs. Not a word, not a sound. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I just stared at the ceiling and counted every crack like it would hold me together. But what I did the next morning, that was the moment she realized the 30 years were over. The next morning, Marion moved like nothing happened. Same house slippers. Same half-hearted yawn. She poured herself the same lukewarm coffee into her chipped, best wife ever mug. The one I got her 15 years ago during a road trip in Arizona. She didn't even glance at me as I sat across from her at the kitchen table. That part stung, but not as much as the memory of her laughter from a few hours earlier. I had already transferred everything I needed. Bank accounts, retirement funds, passwords. I even backed up every photo I ever cared about onto a private drive and tucked it into my briefcase. The legal side? That had been in motion for weeks. Ironic, I know. I had felt something was off for months, but chalked it up to middle age and fading affection. I never imagined I'd be preparing an escape plan from the woman I thought would outlive me. She started scrolling her phone, totally unaware. Or maybe just indifferent. That part one still don't know. Her face looked peaceful, almost annoyingly serene. The kind of peace someone has when they think they're in control. I cleared my throat. She didn't look up. Marion, I said softly. She lifted her gaze like I had interrupted a commercial. I'm heading to the cabin, I said. Alone. That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed. Why? I just need space. You understand, right? I smiled, but my voice cracked. Not from nerves. From grief. From knowing this was the last lie I'd ever tell her. She sipped her coffee, pretending to be amused. Getting dramatic in your old age, Clive? I stood up. No, just finally waking up. I left my wedding ring on the table, right next to her mug. She didn't touch it. I walked out without slamming the door. Because men like me don't storm off, we dissolve. But I wasn't driving to the cabin. I had an address, a name, and a plan. And in less than 48 hours, Marion's perfect little secret would become her biggest nightmare. I didn't go to the cabin. Instead, I parked behind a bakery across town, where no one would recognize my old Toyota. I sat there for nearly an hour, just staring at the little torn scrap of paper I'd taken from the trash 3 weeks ago. The one with a name written in Marion's handwriting. Greg, Wednesday, 8 p.m. At the time, I told myself it must have been a dentist or some mutual friend I forgot. But now I knew better. After Marion's whispered phone call the night before, I dug deeper. I stayed up all night, combing through her texts on the tablet she never realized was still synced to our shared account. Most messages were deleted, but not all. She'd been sloppy. Maybe because she thought I was too passive, too tired to question anything. She wasn't wrong, until now. The messages between her and Greg weren't romantic. They were clinical, strategic. Words like wire, equity, he doesn't know. Sell before he sees the appraisal. The kind of talk people use when they've moved far past affection and strayed into collusion. Greg wasn't just some affair. He was a partner, not in love, but in theft. I traced the number to a small real estate office I'd never heard of. I walked in that afternoon, pretending to be interested in buying a home. The receptionist looked confused. Greg doesn't meet with new clients, she said. He only works through referrals now. I'm a referral, I lied. From Marion. The woman's face changed instantly. Not shock, not suspicion, just the kind of rehearsed calm people wear when they realize they've just stepped in something messy. Ah, got it. One moment, please. She disappeared into the back and didn't return. That told me everything. Greg had no idea I existed yesterday, but now he knew I had arrived. I drove away before anyone could follow me. That evening, Marion texted me. Just one line. Did you go to the cabin? I stared at the message and didn't answer. Because by then, I had something better than a reply. I had a recording. I didn't mean to become a spy in my own marriage. That's the part one keep replaying in my head. I didn't want to catch her. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted her to yell, roll her eyes, call me paranoid, and prove I'd misread everything. But when you stop trusting the person who sleeps beside you, you start doing things you swore you'd never do. The recording wasn't high quality. My hands were shaking when I hid the cheap audio recorder in her car's glove box that morning. I told myself it was desperation, not vengeance. But deep down, I wanted the truth, not the pieces she left behind like crumbs for a dog too dumb to question the walk. She drove off that afternoon. Same time, same lipstick. Like clockwork. I waited 5 hours. I paced. I screamed into a towel once. And when I retrieved the device, I didn't sit down to listen. I couldn't. I just stood in the garage, frozen, while her voice played back to me through a tiny speaker that felt louder than a jet engine. I told you, he still thinks I'm confused. I cried about empty nest syndrome last week, and he offered to pay for couples therapy. I almost choked. Greg's voice replied, cold and smug. You're good at this. He sounds like a golden retriever with arthritis. She laughed. A real laugh. Not one of those polite ones she gives my jokes. This one had teeth. Then she continued. I'll get the last signature next week, and then I'm done pretending. He doesn't even realize I moved our joint funds already. I used his own emergency plan as the cover. Ironic, right? My legs gave out. I sat on the concrete floor and just let it play again. And again, until my throat was dry and my palms raw from gripping the edge of the workbench. I had built this life. I had planned our retirement down to the deck chairs and sunsets. And she, the woman who once cried when I gave her a second-hand piano, had used me like an ATM with a weak pin. But I didn't break. Not completely. Something else woke up in me that night. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to finish this my way. And I knew exactly where to start, with the beach house. The one she thought I didn't know about. I had never been to the coast alone before. Every trip to the beach had always been with Marion, our anniversary tradition for 28 years straight. She loved the sound of waves, the way the sand stuck to her wine glass, the salt in her hair. I used to think those memories were beautiful. Now they felt like evidence, like a trail of crumbs leading me straight to where she buried the truth. The beach house wasn't listed in our shared records. No address in our mortgage files, no mention on tax forms. But I found it anyway. A private purchase, hidden under a shell company. She never expected I'd check the email tied to her old business license. But she used it to register utilities, a mistake she must have thought didn't matter. It did. I drove 5 hours without stopping. The ocean came into view like a cruel joke, glowing blue beneath a sky I was too numb to admire. Her car was parked in the driveway. Red leather seats. Still had the same "Just Breathe" sticker on the back that she put there after her yoga retreat. I stared at it for too long, not because I cared, but because I didn't recognize the person who owned it anymore. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I parked on a hill behind a dune and waited. Watched. 2 hours passed before a man stepped out. Tall, button-down shirt, confident posture. I didn't need to hear him speak to know that was Greg. They walked to the deck together. She handed him a drink and laughed at something he said. Her body leaned into him like it used to lean into me when we were younger and still believed in forever. I didn't feel angry. I felt removed. Like I was watching actors in a play I had once starred in, but had long since forgotten the lines to. I took photos. I filmed a short clip. Not for revenge. Not for blackmail. For proof. For clarity. For the next time I looked in the mirror and questioned whether I had imagined it all. And then I drove back home. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I planned something that would speak louder than rage, colder than silence. Because the moment she stepped foot back in our home, she'd realize I hadn't just packed a bag. I had packed up her future. Marion came home on a Thursday. That was our grocery day. It used to be a routine. She'd send me a list of essentials, most of which were just things she liked and I pretended to enjoy. Avocado hummus, sparkling water with lime, fancy olives we never finished. But this Thursday, I was already gone. I made sure she'd walk in with her little reusable tote bag like she always did, whistling off-key, expecting her world to be waiting. Except it wasn't. Her car pulled into the driveway at 6:12 p.m. I watched from the alley behind the neighbor's shed. Pathetic, maybe, but I wanted to see it. The moment everything shifted. She got out, sunglasses perched on her head, phone in hand, face lit by a text she was writing. I imagined it was to Greg. Probably something shallow and smug like, back in 10. He'll never know. She reached the door, still typing, and tried the lock. Then again, and again. I had changed them all. The confusion on her face gave way to irritation. She knocked once, twice, then pulled out her phone and called me. I didn't answer. She paced the porch, called again, left a voicemail, her tone teetering between annoyance and performative concern. Clive, are you home? I think the lock's broken. Call me back. I listened to it as I drove away. Inside that house, or what used to be our house, I left nothing personal behind. The furniture remained, but everything else was gone. The framed photos, the wedding albums, my clothes, my father's watch, even the old desk where I used to write her birthday letters. All cleared out. I didn't just move out. I erased myself. I transferred the deed to a separate account under my name, one she'd foolishly signed over 2 years ago during a trust-building estate update. It took one meeting with a lawyer and 3 notarized pages to freeze her out. And just to be sure she got the message, I left one thing taped to the bathroom mirror, a photo of her and Greg on the beach deck, smiling, arms around each other, with one line written beneath it. 30 years together. 30 seconds to walk away. Consider this mine. For 2 days, Marion didn't contact me. No calls. No messages. Just digital silence. I imagined her sitting in her car outside the locked house, scrolling through her options, making lists in her head like she always did when she lost control. Step 1, lie. Step 2, cry. Step 3, manipulate. It had always worked, until now. She showed up at my sister's place on the 3rd day. I wasn't there. But Janet told me everything. How Marion stood outside in a pristine beige coat, mascara smudged just enough to look accidental. She didn't ask where I was. She asked if Janet knew how to talk sense into me. Said I was going through something. That I was lashing out. That this wasn't like me. Janet just stared at her. Didn't invite her in. Didn't even blink. Then she said, "You should leave before he decides to remind you how much he knows." Marion turned pale. She knew that meant more than it sounded. That night, she broke the silence. Her message started with the usual performance. "Clive, I'm sorry if you misunderstood anything. We need to talk." And then came the shift. "If this is about the money, we can figure something out. You don't have to ruin everything." Everything. That word. She meant her new life. Her beach house. Her clean exit. The one where she gets to cry to her friends about losing herself in marriage and starting fresh at 55. I was just supposed to be the boring first chapter. I didn't respond. Instead, I finalized the last step. I scheduled a delivery to her beach house. A simple white box. Inside, copies of her own messages with Greg. The photos. The financial statements she didn't think I'd find. And a printed transcript of the recording. Every word, every laugh, every moment she carved me out of her future. On top, I left a note. Not angry. Not bitter. Just this. "You spent 30 years pretending to love me. I spent 3 days learning how to forget you. I win." And still, part of me hoped she'd call just to say something real. Anything. But when the phone finally rang, it wasn't her voice on the line. It was Greg's. Greg's voice on the line was steady, too steady, calculated, like a man who'd never had to raise it to get what he wanted. "You made your point," he said. "She's devastated. You got what you wanted, so let's not drag this into something ugly." I didn't respond right away. I just let the silence hang. The old me would have fumbled for words, apologized for the drama, maybe even taken some of the blame. But that version of Clive? He didn't live here anymore. After a pause, I said, "You don't get to define how this ends." I already did. Then I hung up. That moment, that click, was the quietest sound I've ever made that felt like thunder. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. What I needed was done. She had spent years treating me like background noise in her own movie. And I had finally walked out of the theater. No dramatic monologues. No messy finales. Just the calm certainty of knowing I wasn't the fool anymore. A week later, I rented a tiny place near the water. Not her beach, mine. A different coast, quieter. I started repainting furniture I found at thrift stores. I started eating dinner with no phone on the table. I started waking up without that sick feeling in my chest. And maybe best of all, I started writing again. Not emails, not documents, but pages. My own words. For the first time in years, they weren't about her. They were about me. Who I had been. Who I wanted to be next. I never replied to Marion again. She sent one last message. Can we please just talk? I read it once, smiled sadly, and deleted it. 30 years together. 30 seconds to end it. And finally, I could breathe. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you were in Clive's shoes, what would you have done differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially the moment you found most shocking. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories just like this.